Section 4, Part 1, Chapter 1, continued, of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, by Vicente Blasco Ibáñez. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. "I have the honor to inform you, young man," he said, imitating the cutting coldness of the diplomats, "that you are merely a South American and know nothing of the affairs of Europe." He did not call him an Indian, but Julio heard the implication as though he had used the word itself. Ah, if that hidden handclasp had not held him with its sentimental thrills! But this contact kept him calm and even made him smile. "Thanks, Captain," he said to himself. "It is the least you can do to get even with me." Here his relations with the German and his clientele came to an end. The merchants, as they approached nearer and nearer to their native land, began casting off that servile desire of ingratiating themselves which they had assumed in all their trips to the New World. They now had more important things to occupy them. The telegraphic service was working without cessation. The commandant of the vessel was conferring in his apartment with the counsellor as his compatriot of most importance. His friends were hunting out the most obscure places in order to talk confidentially with one another. Even Bertha commenced to avoid Desnoyers. She was still smiling distantly at him, but that smile was more of a souvenir than a reality. Between Lisbon and the coast of England, Julio spoke with her husband for the last time. Every morning was appearing on the bulletin board the alarming news transmitted by radiograph. The Empire was arming itself against its enemies. God would punish them, making all manner of troubles fall upon them. Desnoyers was motionless with astonishment before the last piece of news. 300,000 revolutionists are now besieging Paris. The suburbs are beginning to burn. The horrors of the Commune have broken out again. "My, but these Germans have gone mad!" exclaimed the disgusted youth to the curious group surrounding the radio sheet. "We are going to lose the little sense that we have left. What revolutionists are they talking about? How could a revolution break out in Paris if the men of the government are not reactionary?" A gruff voice sounded behind him, rude, authoritative, as if trying to banish the doubts of the audience. It was the Herr Kommerzienrat who was speaking. "Young man, these notices are sent us by the first agencies of Germany, and Germany never lies." After this affirmation, he turned his back upon them and they saw him no more. On the following morning, the last day of the voyage, Desnoyers' steward awoke him in great excitement. "Herr, come up on deck. A most beautiful spectacle." The sea was veiled by the fog, but behind its hazy curtains could be distinguished some silhouettes like islands with great towers and sharp pointed minarets. The islands were advancing over the oily waters slowly and majestically, with impressive dignity. Julio counted 18. They appeared to fill the ocean. It was the Channel Fleet, which had just left the English coast by government order, sailing around simply to show its strength. Seeing this procession of dreadnoughts for the first time, Desnoyers was reminded of a flock of marine monsters and gained a better idea of the British power. The German ship passed among them, shrinking, humiliated, quickening its speed. One might suppose, mused the youth, that she had an uneasy conscience and wished to scud to safety. A South American passenger near him was jesting with one of the Germans. "What if they have already declared war? What if they should make us prisoners?" After midday they entered Southampton roads. The Frederic Auguste hurried to get away as soon as possible, and transacted business with dizzying celerity. The cargo of passengers and baggage was enormous. 2 launches approached the transatlantic and discharged an avalanche of German residents in England who invaded the decks with the joy of those who tread friendly soil, desiring to see Hamburg as soon as possible. Then the boat sailed through the channel with a speed most unusual in these places. The people, leaning on the railing, were commenting on the extraordinary encounters in this marine boulevard, usually frequented by ships of peace. Certain smoke lines on the horizon were from the French squadron carrying President Poincaré, who was returning from Russia. The European alarm had interrupted his trip. Then they saw more English vessels patrolling the coast like aggressive and vigilant dogs. Two North American battleships could be distinguished by their mastheads in the form of baskets. Then a Russian battleship, white and glistening, passed at full steam on its way to the Baltic. "Bad," said the South American passengers regretfully. "Very bad. It looks this time as if it were going to be serious." And they glanced uneasily at the neighboring coasts on both sides. Although they presented the usual appearance, behind them, perhaps, a new period of history was in the making. The transatlantic was due at Boulogne at midnight, where it was supposed to wait until daybreak to discharge its passengers comfortably. It arrived, nevertheless, at 10, dropped anchor outside the harbor, and the Commandant gave orders that the disembarkation should take place in less than an hour. For this reason they had quickened their speed, consuming a vast amount of extra coal. It was necessary to get away as soon as possible, seeking the refuge of Hamburg. The radiographic apparatus had evidently been working to some purpose. By the glare of the bluish searchlights, which were spreading a livid clearness over the sea, began the unloading of passengers and baggage for Paris. From the transatlantic into the tenders. "Hurry, hurry!" The seamen were pushing forward the ladies of slow step, who were recounting their valises, believing that they had lost some. The stewards loaded themselves up with babies as though they were bundles. The general precipitation dissipated the usual exaggerated and oily Teutonic amiability. "They are regular bootlickers," thought Desnoyers. "They believe that their hour of triumph has come, and do not think it necessary to pretend any longer." He was soon in a launch that was bobbing up and down on the waves near the black and immovable hulk of the great liner, dotted with many circles of light and filled with people waving handkerchiefs. Julio recognized Bertha, who was waving her hand without seeing him, without knowing in which tender he was, but feeling obliged to show her gratefulness for the sweet memories that now were being lost in the mystery of the sea and the night. "Adieu, Frau Rath." The distance between the departing transatlantic and the lighters was widening. As though it had been awaiting this moment with impunity, a stentorian voice in the upper deck shouted with a noisy guffaw, "See you later! Soon we shall meet you in Paris!" And the marine band, the very same band that 3 days before had astonished Desnoyers with its unexpected Marseillaise, burst forth into a military march of the time of Frederick the Great, a march of grenadiers with an accompaniment of trumpets. That had been the night before. Although 24 hours had not yet passed by, Desnoyers was already considering it as a distant event of shadowy reality. His thoughts, always disposed to take the opposite side, did not share in the general alarm. The insolence of the counsellor now appeared to him but the boastings of a burgher turned into a soldier. The disquietude of the people of Paris was but the nervous agitation of a city which lived placidly and became alarmed at the first hint of danger to its comfort. So many times they had spoken of an immediate war, always settling things peacefully at the last moment. Furthermore, he did not want war to come because it would upset all his plans for the future. And the man accepted as logical and reasonable everything that suited his selfishness, placing it above reality. "No, there will not be war," he repeated as he continued pacing up and down the garden. "These people are beside themselves. How could a war possibly break out in these days?" And after disposing of his doubts, which certainly would in a short time come up again, he thought of the joy of the moment. Consulting his watch, 5 o'clock! She might come now at any minute. He thought that he recognized her afar off in a lady who was passing through the grating by the rue Pasquier. She seemed to him a little different, but it occurred to him that possibly the summer fashions might have altered her appearance. But soon he saw that he had made a mistake. She was not alone. Another lady was with her. They were perhaps English or North American women who worshiped the memory of Marie Antoinette and wished to visit the Chapelle Expiatoire, the old tomb of the executed queen. Julio watched them as they climbed the flights of steps and crossed the interior patio in which were interred the 800 Swiss soldiers killed in the attack of the 10th of August, with other victims of revolutionary fury. Disgusted at his error, he continued his tramp. His ill humor made the monument with which the Bourbon Restoration had adorned the old cemetery of the Madeleine appear uglier than ever to him. Time was passing, but she did not come. Every time that he turned, he looked hungrily at the entrances of the garden. And then it happened as in all their meetings. She suddenly appeared as if she had fallen from the sky or risen from the ground like an apparition. A cough, a slight rustling of footsteps, and as he turned, Julio almost collided with her. Marguerite! Oh, Marguerite! It was she, and yet he was slow to recognize her. He felt a certain strangeness in seeing in full reality the countenance which had occupied his imagination for 3 months, each time more spirituelle and shadowy with the idealism of absence. But his doubts were of short duration. Then it seemed as though time and space were eliminated, that he had not made any voyage, and but a few hours had intervened since their last interview. Marguerite divined the expansion which might follow Julio's exclamations, the vehement hand clasp, perhaps something more. So she kept herself calm and serene. "No, not here," she said with a grimace of repugnance. "What a ridiculous idea for us to have met here!" They were about to seat themselves on the iron chairs in the shadow of some shrubbery when she rose suddenly. Those who were passing along the boulevard might see them by merely casting their eyes toward the garden. At this time, many of her friends might be passing through the neighborhood because of its proximity to the big shops. They, therefore, sought refuge at a corner of the monument, placing themselves between it and the rue des Mathurins. Desnoyers brought 2 chairs near the hedge, so that when seated they were invisible to those passing on the other side of the railing. But this was not solitude. A few steps away, a fat, near-sighted man was reading his paper, and a group of women were chatting and embroidering. A woman with a red wig and 2 dogs, some housekeeper, who had come down into the garden in order to give her pets an airing, passed several times near the amorous pair, smiling discreetly. "How annoying!" groaned Marguerite. "Why did we ever come to this place?" The two scrutinized each other carefully, wishing to see exactly what transformation time had wrought. "You are darker than ever," she said. "You look like a man of the sea." Julio was finding her even lovelier than before, and felt sure that possessing her was well worth all the contrarieties which had brought about his trip to South America. She was taller than he, with an elegantly proportioned slenderness. "She has the musical step," Desnoyers had told himself when seeing her in his imagination, and now, on beholding her again, the first thing that he admired was her rhythmic tread, light and graceful as she passed through the garden, seeking another seat. Her features were not regular, but they had a piquant fascination, a true Parisian face. Everything that had been invented for the embellishment of feminine charm was used about her person with the most exquisite fastidiousness. She had always lived for herself. Only a few months before had she abdicated a part of this sweet selfishness, sacrificing reunions, teas, and calls in order to give Desnoyers some of the afternoon hours. Section 4, recording by Tony Oliva, Albuquerque, New Mexico.